I know I made a video today, but I wanted to get some stuff off my chest. I was really kind of ticked off today. Love having these bases here at Susan's place. I can only hang four of them here, which is kind of sad. I have, gosh, how many do I have hung up in the other room? I can actually hang up 13 in my room in my house, and that's the music room. But that's beside the point. But I've got some over here. And I was just really irritated. The thing I've noticed more and more is when I go to work, when I go to my job, I have that like instant like fight or flight response, that amygdala response, that if you know about brain chemistry and all that kind of stuff, and that instant feeling of like, man, this is not, something's not right. And the worst part about it is that it doesn't just happen once, because I go to several different locations. And any given day in my job, I visit. Part of what I do is I visit various sites, and I put away material for it's industrial supply type stuff and tooling. And so I go into various different places where I put this material away that's been delivered there, and check things out. So on any given day, I'll go to, it could be several different accounts. And so I have that experience over and over again every time I go to one of the accounts and during certain parts of the day. And it's as if like everything in my body is screaming to me, you're in the wrong place or you're in danger. And it is one of those things, excuse me, I have to take a drink here. Just delicious Diet Coke. That's all we're going to take here. No, we're not numbing ourselves these days. Um, it's one of those things where it's very visceral. I don't know if you can relate to this, if you've ever gotten to this point with a relationship or your vocation or any other circumstance in your life where it's not just, not just in your head, the anxiety response or the fight or flight response is like throughout your entire body. And you get that, and it's hard to talk about, because sometimes I get to this point where I feel like I'm almost about to cry. I'm not really quite sure why. I don't actually cry. Not that I'm macho or anything like that, but you know, it's kind of interesting to kind of watch myself and be detached, and look at my reactions like, that's interesting. But it's gotten to that point, and I'm a Gen Xer, and I just squeak. I think Gen X started in '65, and I don't know exactly what year Gen X actually ends. Um, but there are definitely some things that happened, or some commonalities for Gen X people in terms of our experiences, clearly, and in terms of the conditioning that we got. And we definitely got programmed, intentionally or unintentionally, to, you know, look at life a certain way. And while we were definitely a more jaded generation than our boomer counterparts, and we kind of bear that reputation, deservedly. Excuse me. We also definitely still got conditioned to this, with this idea that you know you're going to go to school, go to college, get this education, get this particular job, have this life path, and get married, and have the two kids and the white picket fence and all that sort of stuff, and got fed a lot of productivity, um, or had the idea of productivity being very, very important, really being drilled into us, and without really, with it almost kind of justifying our existence, where it's like sort of like a moral obligation rather than it's a means to an end. And it certainly serves society and the people at the top well. um, but it's because of that. I think it's common to lots of people in society as a whole, but a lot of people like Gen X now. I really should look up exactly when Gen X ended. If anybody knows and you're watching, just tell me in the chat. Um, we're not young anymore. So, I'm going to be 57 this Friday, and so I'm actually early Gen X. I was born 1968. Can you believe that, from the name of my channel? But a large number of us we're in our 50s, and now some of us are in our late 50s. Certainly, all by now we're all in our 40s or late 40s, and so we've experienced a certain amount of life. And it's not just that we've experienced a certain amount of life, but unless we've done something different, if we've just gone down the traditional route of being an employee, then we have just a lot of years of doing the same thing and being really not just set in our ways, because that's the wrong way to say it, and not just comfortable, but we've certainly stayed in that mindset and done those things for long enough that they're very difficult habits to break out of. And at least I can only share my own experience. When for years I'm thinking, this is wrong, this is something I want to be doing different than this, and didn't actually do it because of various messages and life circumstances and fear. When you have that much experience of doing what doesn't serve you, it's more difficult. You can start to feel like it's too late for you and all that kind of junk, which isn't true. But very often, that shows up in my negative self-talk as I'm getting, I hate to use the word triggered, but as I'm getting, as that happens to me when I'm at work. I'm always wondering, where should I sit? Where should I sit when I'm in front of these guitars? Because sometimes it looks like one's sprouting out of my head. One of the things I was thinking of doing, of course, nobody gets rich writing a role-playing game, hardly. But one of the things I was thinking was like maybe writing an RPG just for the sheer joy of it, because a lot of what I want to do, like, is to do things I actually enjoy. Like, can I make a living doing the things I really like? And it doesn't mean I have to be super successful or anything like that, but can I, I've only got so many hours in a day, and I've only got so much time left. All of us have only so much time left, and I think it behooves us, if there's something we really want to do, we ought to do it. So part of what I'm thinking about, I've talked to Susan about like, maybe writing a role-playing game or two. And she did mention this one that I guess a friend of hers helped write or wrote. It's for Polymorph Games. It's called Venture Society. It's actually written for therapists, by therapists, I believe. It's for using in library, school, therapy sessions, written by therapists, educators, and librarians. It looks pretty interesting. She did an unboxing for me over Meet, so I haven't actually read all of it. However, a good amount of this, it appears to be less of a role-playing game than a structured game which allows some role play, or in which some role play can occur. And which is interesting, because we were kicking around the idea. Instantly she said to me, "Hey, it'd be really cool if we could write a role-playing game for people with dyslexia or people that have learning disabilities and find reading all that stuff difficult." And being a guy that was really into rules light, I'm like, "Hey, that'd be kind of cool." And especially, as enamored as I am with the dice mechanic that I think it's Free League uses with Blade Runner, and you can't copyright the actual mechanic. You can copyright the whole thing, the system, but not the mechanic. And that's kind of interesting when you look at, like, getting one success or two successes on step dice, because you don't actually need the numbers. You could actually just print dice with different color dice with different colors. Is this a success or not? And have pictures and not have not have so many words. But as we're talking about doing something like this, once again, she mentioned the idea of maybe doing it where it could be somewhat progressive depending on the, age of the people. And if I could write something like for students, or for a resource for teachers or something to use, which would be interesting. But once again, it would probably end up being more of a game in which some role playing could be used as opposed to an actual bona fide role playing game. So I'm not exactly sure if I'd want to do that. I'm gonna have to discuss that with her further and talk, and look into like what actually could what it would actually take. Certainly sounds like an interesting idea, but I'm not entirely sure if that's, once again, is that something I really want to do, because it wouldn't produce a product that I would necessarily want to play or run for people. Maybe it would. I don't know. So anyhow, that's just kicking around the idea in the early stages of stuff. That's the other thing, though. Once, if you're like me, you make this decision to, what, screw this. I'm not going to be trapped for the rest of my life in a job or a situation I hate, because I guess I just heard somebody quote Steve Jobs, so I have to see if Steve Jobs really said this. Not that you want to model your life after Steve Jobs by any means, but apparently he said that he looked at his schedule or his to-do list, and if something that he had on his to-do list constantly made him feel bad or sucked, then he got rid of it. Because, like, life isn't about things sucking. You're like, why should I do things over and over again that suck? Now, of course, now if you're like me and you're, Gen Xers had a job that you hate, or jobs that you hate for a long time, now you're like, well, this is sucking a lot. But then as you start to, or as I start to look at all the various things I could do to make a living or just be fulfilled, but be able to be fulfilled and make a living at the same time, because unless all of you nice people all of a sudden gave me tons of money in super chats and Patreon and all this other kind of stuff, I don't think I'm going to make a living by doing nothing, by just living off the charity of others. I've always depended on the kindness of strangers. And yeah, unless I'm going to be Blanche Dubois, I have to do something. And it's very interesting to see, as various ideas present themselves, how easy it is to start thinking about all the ways that it wouldn't work, or I'm not really sure if I'd want to do this or not. It's kind of one of the, and I have to read this and have to see like what, if I could come up with something better or different along the same lines that would be useful for that kind of, academics or for teachers and all that kind of stuff. However, educators, that's the word I'm looking for. However, it's amazing like how fast we can start to talk ourselves out of the various things. But one of the things I noticed, and I saw like repeated over and over again recently, was this idea that smart people tend not to be as successful for a couple of reasons. One of which is that if you're smart enough, when you're looking at a career idea, or you're looking at like, well, maybe I could write a game like this. If you're really smart, you can start to like look down the path of where this would go, what that might entail, what your life might look like if you got job X. If you advanced up the corporate ladder, or if you got a degree in whatever it happens to be and got a job as a research chemist, or whatever it happens to be, and you start to figure out what the life of a person that does that would be like, what this particular task would be like, what this particular journey would be like, and you start to say, well, gosh, I don't think I'd want to do that. Whereas, if you're more of average intelligence, maybe you haven't figured all those things out, and so you just go ahead and blunder ahead and do it, and you become more successful. The other trap, yes, Piper, I know, I love you too, one of Sue's dogs. Piper's demanding my attention. Oh, there's Dijon wants my attention too. But one of the other things that tends to happen to us smarter people as well is that we've been taught from an early age that our value, or at least our value, was in being smart and being able to figure things out easily and instantly. And we got a lot of praise for being smart. And at some point, things became harder, and we, because we hadn't had to work as hard to get things, to understand things, to accomplish academic things or figure things out in general, that we become more discouraged, and that our identity as being the smart person is threatened. And because of that, we tend not to try anymore because we hit a wall. Various reasons that people that are smarter have a harder time succeeding. But there are things, I noticed, like as a Gen Xer, I think it's just that, we're not boomers. We haven't, and there's nothing, if you're a boomer, it's no big deal. But, we're, the majority of boomers are real, a lot of them are in retirement age. Not all of them. The tail end of boomers certainly aren't. But a lot of us Xers have still been around for a while, and so we're set in our ways. We've reinforced a lot of our belief systems in terms of what we can and cannot do, what would is and is not possible. And it's easy to think to you, well, man, I've I've been working now for like 40 years. I mean, as an employee, it's probably too late for me to do anything else, and which is BS. But it's something that we can get stuck in. And we were just sold a huge, huge line of be very, very, very productive, and to value money and success over other. Anybody remember the 80s? It was insane. It was insane. It wasn't just the cocaine. It was insane in terms of like just how much money was around. And it was, that kind of got drilled into us to a certain extent. That and equating that with worth, and equating, that sort of success with fulfillment, as opposed to, I guess, more of the vibe of the 70s, where you were being more self-actualized and all that kind of stuff, which I missed for the most part because I was very little. But we definitely got, exposed to a lot of that mentality and mindset. And then we were just in time for the 90s to be angsty. I love the 90s. I really, really love the 90s. You know, I was definitely into the 60s and 70s music. Now that we're departing into the music area, and most 80s music. I mean, now I look back at it nostalgically, and when I started seeing the old MTV playlists, I was like, oh, that's really cool. But it was just nostalgic, and I actually discovered a lot of bands that I poo-pooed at the time. More the new wave type stuff like Duran Duran and whatnot. Man, those are some hard bass lines, dude. That's like sick stuff. Still not my favorite music, but like on a musicality level, English Invasion had a lot of stuff going on. Um, and yeah, there was a lot of cool, underground metal and whatnot. But like, the hair metal got to be a thing. Grateful Dead were actually very cool in the '80s. Love the Brent Midland era. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. But the '90s, yeah, I just love the fact that rock and roll came back, like real, honest to God rock and roll. And I didn't really see it as alternative. I saw it as a kind of return to what rock music was. And I remember there was a show called 120 Minutes on MTV at night, and I was working a third shift job at the time, and so it was 1990, and then I think it just turned 91, and I remember seeing Even Flow, and hey G, I remember seeing Even Flow, and I was like, holy crap, I'm never going to see that video again. I remember seeing like Never Smells Like Teen Spirit the next night. And I think maybe it was like Them Bones or something. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm never going to see these videos again. They're flukes. And then they were like huge hits. And then, rock music came back. Yes, boomers definitely had it better than Gen X. I don't know, G, are you a Gen X? Or you're not a millennial, are you? I think you're too old to be a millennial. And if you know when the hell Gen X stopped, let me know, because I can't remember. Um, yeah, boomers definitely had it better than us financially. My parents, bought a house for almost nothing, and my mom was able to pay it off, and her mortgage payments, I forget what they were. They were crazy low. You're born in 1983, so that makes you. Does that make you a millennial? 83, man. I graduated high school in '86. Get off my lawn. Oh, okay, Gen Y. I love you, G. That's cool. That's right. I forgot about Gen Y. More forgettable than Gen X, which is hard. That's terrible. That's terrible. Um, but yeah, like, I mean, boomers definitely had it easier. And, I didn't, even as Xers, we definitely had it easier than the generations coming up. I did not take out a college loan, didn't go to college, so I can't comment on that. But my friends, I believe, were able to pay it off a little bit faster. And so we entered, I mean, gosh, in the '90s, the money was not flowing as freely as it was in the '80s. It just wasn't. Um, but it was still more possible to get by. And, and then things really kind of tanked after that. And now it's just, it's unreal. It's unreal. What my house, I've got this mortgage, we got it at the exact right time. I think my mortgage rate is now we're way off topic, whatever the hell the topic is. I think my mortgage rate is something like 3%. And my mortgage payment is nowhere near what like a 2-bedroom apartment would cost. If I rented my house out, I saw the going rates for renting my house out. I'm like, you're kidding me. You're kidding me. Why wouldn't you just buy a house? But now interest rates are crazy and what have you. And people can't get loans sometimes. But yeah, very, very tough for the newer generation, which I think is almost, for some of them, I think almost pushes them into, maybe I'll do something unconventional and more creative and off the beaten path. Not everybody, because I think every generation is going to have the masses that are going to go do what I did and just have a job. But I remember talking to members of, and this is back in the 80s too. Remember talking to members of groups that were more marginalized, and I'll leave it at that. And I noticed a lot of them opened businesses and were, doing really well in businesses. And I asked them about that. And, I got very good friends. And they said, honestly, a lot of us, my peers and I, we opened businesses because it was harder for us to get jobs because we were being discriminated against. And so we were our backs were kind of up against the wall. And so we said, what, screw that. I'm just going to open a business instead. And, I wonder now if with some of the, like say college graduates, the younger generation, man, I sound so old when I say that kind of crap. I wonder if they'll be more inclined to do something more creative and outside the box. And, I think that's another thing that happened to Gen Xers is, we saw how good our parents did, how good the boomers did, and we kind of assumed that's what was going to happen for us, and that was the best way to go, go be union strong, work for somebody, and all that kind of stuff. And, slowly kind of eroded around us, but it was still comfortable enough that we can live lives of quiet desperation and not do something different, Which is sad, which is why I said, screw that. I'm not doing that anymore. Because, listen, this weekend I hung around with Susan. I played a couple gigs. I did not play any RPGs, which was sad. But we did talk a little bit about RPGs at some point. And, went out to eat. And I was like, you know what? I just want to do that all the time. Yeah, and then Sunday, a large amount of Sunday was spent worrying about Monday. Screw that. Screw that. Time to go do something the rest of the time that I actually give a rat's ass about. You know what I mean? Be able to just write role-playing games for a living. You can get rich doing that, right? Be able to be a role-playing game consultant. You know what they need, though, for role-playing games is editors and proofreaders. People that really go through those things with a fine-tooth comb. Yeah, that could be a high-paying career. What do we think? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But it's time. It's time for me to do something different. Is it time for you to do something different? Yeah. We play role-playing games, if you play role-playing games, if you're that part of my channel. And the characters take matters into their own hands. Playing like some loud, obnoxious rock and roll music, and we're sticking it to the man. But we're, not really sticking it to the man. We're playing and talking and yelling about sticking it to the man and playing loud, obnoxious music. But then it's time to live like real life. The other 23 hours. And then, why should we just behave like mice then and be obedient? Why not stick it to the man then, and take matters into our own hands? At least that's kind of the lesson that I've started to internalize more and more because, for me, doing something different was a long time coming. Which is why all aspects of my channel all actually are the same thing. You take matters in your own hands in role-playing games. You stick it to the man when you play music. And, God damn it, let's do something for ourselves instead of doing it for the man. You know what I mean? Well, that's enough venting. Maybe that made some sense. Maybe it made no sense whatsoever. But, yeah. Good to see you, G.